The slap echoed through the marble halls of justice like a gunshot. In that single violent moment, Officer James Reeves made the worst mistake of his career, and he had no idea. The man he just humiliated, the janitor he mocked in front of dozens of witnesses, was about to change his life forever. Because William Thompson wasn't a janitor. He was the judge. Stay with me until the end of this story. You won't believe what happens next. And comment below what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this message of justice has traveled. The morning of September 18th began like any other Tuesday at the Monroe County Superior Court. Outside, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the stone steps, where lawyers in expensive suits hurried past protesters holding signs about police reform. Inside, the building hummed with the familiar chaos of American justice plea bargains whispered in corners, families crying in hallways, and the constant shuffle of feet on polished marble floors that had witnessed 60 years of verdicts. But today would be different. Today, the courthouse would become the stage for a confrontation that would expose wounds the city had been trying to ignore for decades. William Thompson sat alone in the courthouse basement break room, the fluorescent lights humming above his head. At 52 years old, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that some mistook for weakness. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, his dark suit impeccable despite the early hour. In his hands he held a paper cup of bitter coffee, reviewing case files for the morning's docket. Thompson had been a judge for 12 years, a prosecutor for 10 before that, and before that a kid from the West Side projects who'd studied by streetlight because the electricity got cut off too often at home. He'd seen every angle of the justice system from the gutters to the bench, and he knew its flaws intimately. He also knew that real change came slowly, case by case, decision by decision. His phone buzzed. A text from his clerk, Judge Courtroom 4A, is ready. Case number 2024 CR 11847. State v. Marcus Riley. Officer Reeves is already here. Thompson allowed himself a slight frown. Officer James Reeves. He'd heard that name too many times in recent months, always attached to cases that felt wrong. Arrests that didn't quite add up. Evidence that conveniently disappeared. Testimonies that changed. But nothing concrete enough to act on. Not yet. He finished his coffee, straightened his tie, and headed for the stairs. The judge's robe hung in his chambers on the 4th floor, but he preferred to walk through the main corridors, first observing the pulse of the courthouse, staying connected to the reality of what happened here. As he climbed the stairs from the basement, Thompson heard raised voices echoing from the 2nd floor landing. He paused, listening. "I don't care what your protocol says," a man's voice sharp with authority and irritation. "I need to see the case files right now. Do you understand who I am?" "Sir, I understand, but I can only release files to authorized personnel with proper—" A younger voice, female, trying to remain professional. "Proper. What, I'm a 15-year veteran of the police force. I'm testifying in 20 minutes. Thompson rounded the corner and saw them. A court clerk, probably not even 30 years old, stood behind the public information desk, her face flushed. In front of her, leaning over the counter with aggressive familiarity, was Officer James Reeves. Reeves was exactly what you'd imagine from Central Casting, 40-something, barrel-chested, with the kind of confidence that comes from years of people doing exactly what you tell them to do. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished to a mirror shine. His partner, a younger officer named Rodriguez, stood a few feet back, looking uncomfortable. "Ma'am," Thompson said quietly, approaching the desk. "Is there a problem?" Reeves turned, his eyes sweeping over Thompson with barely concealed dismissal. He saw what he expected to see: a black man in a suit, probably a public defender or someone's uncle waiting for court. "No problem that concerns you," Reeves said, turning back to the clerk. "This is official police business." Thompson remained calm. "I work here. If there's a disruption—" "Listen, pal," Reeves interrupted, his voice hardening. "I don't know if you're somebody's lawyer or what, but this doesn't involve you. Why don't you go wait with the rest of the defendants?" The clerk's eyes widened. "Sir, this is—" But Thompson raised a gentle hand, stopping her. He'd been here before, not this exact situation, but close enough. He'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting in the moment. Some lessons people had to learn the hard way. "My apologies," Thompson said evenly. "I didn't mean to interfere." Reeves smirked, satisfied. "That's more like it. Rodriguez, let's go. We'll get the files from the prosecutor directly." As the two officers walked past Reeves's shoulder, deliberately bumped into Thompson's. Not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to send a message. "You're in my way." Thompson watched them go, his expression unchanged. The clerk looked mortified. "Judge Thompson, I'm so sorry I tried to—" "It's fine, Maria," Thompson said softly. "It's not your fault." "But he doesn't even know who you are." "No," Thompson agreed, picking up his briefcase from where he'd set it down. "He doesn't." Courtroom 4A was one of the older chambers in the building, with high ceilings, dark wood paneling, and tall windows that let in slanted bars of morning light. It could seat maybe 80 people, and this morning it was nearly full. The case of State v. Marcus Riley had drawn attention a young black man accused of assaulting an officer during a traffic stop. The local activists had been following it for weeks. Thompson entered through the back corridor that led to his chambers. His clerk, James, a sharp law graduate who'd clerked for Thompson for 2 years, was waiting with updated briefs. "Morning, Judge. Riley's defense attorney just filed a motion to suppress the dashcam footage. Claims it was edited." Thompson took the papers, scanning them quickly. "What's the prosecutor's response?" "They're arguing the footage is intact and authenticated, but—" James hesitated. "But what?" "But the defense has a digital forensics expert who says there's a 4-minute gap that doesn't match the officer's report timeline." Thompson looked up sharply. "Officer Reeves's report?" "Yes, sir." Of course it was. Thompson had reviewed Reeves's arrest reports before. They were always perfectly written, every box checked, every procedure followed on paper. But lately, too many of those arrests had started to crumble under scrutiny. "All right," Thompson said, putting on his robe. The fabric settled on his shoulders like armor. "Let's proceed." He opened the door to the courtroom, and the bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise, the Honorable Judge William Thompson presiding." The room stood as one, a wave of rustling fabric and shuffling feet. Thompson walked to the bench, his face composed, professional. He didn't look at the audience yet. He was still settling into the role, the mindset becoming not William Thompson the man, but Judge Thompson the arbiter. "Please be seated," he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. As the crowd sat, Thompson finally looked up, scanning the room. The defense table on his left. Marcus Riley, a 23-year-old with scared eyes and a cheap suit, sitting next to his public defender. Catherine Martinez, a fighter with 14 years of experience and a reputation for not backing down. The prosecution table on his right, Assistant DA Gerald Hutchinson, organized and ready, his files spread before him like battle plans. And behind the prosecution, in the front row, reserved for law enforcement witnesses, sat Officer James Reeves. Their eyes met. Reeves's expression flickered confusion, then recognition, then something darker. He'd seen Thompson before, just minutes ago in the hallway. But he hadn't seen him as Judge Thompson. Not until this moment. Thompson held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to acknowledge, not long enough to seem petty, and then looked down at his papers. "Case number 2024 CR 1847, he began. "State of Monroe versus Marcus Riley. Counselors, are we ready to proceed?" "Ready for the state, Your Honor," Hutchinson said, standing. "Ready for the defense." "Your Honor," Martinez echoed. "Very well. Ms. Martinez, I see you've filed a motion to suppress the dashcam footage. Would you like to present your argument?" Martinez stood, buttoning her blazer. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense moves to suppress the dashcam video from the traffic stop on the grounds that it has been materially altered and therefore cannot be authenticated as required under Rule 901 of the Rules of Evidence." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Thompson raised a hand, and silence fell. On what basis do you claim the footage has been altered? Your Honor, we have a forensic analysis from Dr. Rachel Kim, a digital evidence expert. Her report shows a clear gap in the video metadata. 4 minutes and 17 seconds are missing from the recording. During that exact time frame, Officer Reeves claims in his report that Mr. Riley became physically aggressive. Yet we have no video evidence of this aggression. Hutchinson was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. The state has provided authentication from the police department's technical division confirming the video's integrity. The same police department that employs Officer Reeves. Martinez interrupted. With all due respect to my colleague, this is asking the Fox to investigate the henhouse. Ms. Martinez, Thompson said calmly, let the prosecutor finish. Hutchinson cleared his throat. Your Honor, technical glitches occur. Cameras malfunction. This doesn't prove tampering, it proves imperfect technology. Officer Reeves has 15 years of exemplary service. 15 years that the defense intends to examine very closely, Martinez said. Thompson leaned back in his chair. This was exactly what he'd feared, and exactly what needed to happen. The case was about to become much bigger than a traffic stop. Here's what we're going to do, Thompson said. I'm going to hear testimony from both the arresting officer and the defense's expert. Then I'll make a ruling on the admissibility of the video. Mr. Hutchinson, call your first witness. The state calls Officer James Reeves to the stand. Reeves stood his uniform crisp, his bearing confident. He walked to the witness stand like he owned it, placing his hand on the Bible without hesitation. The bailiff began. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do, Reeves said firmly, settling into the chair. His eyes found Thompson again, and this time there was something calculating in them. He was sizing up the situation, figuring out his play. Hutchinson approached friendly and professional. Officer Reeves, please state your name and badge number for the record. Officer James Reeves, badge number 22847, Monroe City Police Department. How long have you been with the department? 15 years this November. And during those 15 years, how many arrests have you made? Reeves allowed himself a small smile. Over 400, sir, ranging from traffic violations to major felonies. That's quite a record. How many of those arrests have resulted in complaints against you? I've had maybe a dozen complaints over the years, all investigated, all dismissed or unfounded. Thompson watched carefully. The answer was technically accurate, but it raised questions. A dozen complaints in 15 years wasn't nothing, it was actually above average. But Reeves delivered it with such confidence that it sounded like vindication. Hutchinson continued. Now let's talk about the evening of June 14, 2024. Can you describe what happened? Reeves shifted in his seat, getting comfortable. Yes, sir. At approximately 9:45 p.m., I observed a vehicle, a 2015 Honda Accord, traveling southbound on Patterson Avenue. The vehicle's left tail light was out, and it was weaving slightly within its lane. I activated my lights and initiated a traffic stop. What happened next? The vehicle pulled over immediately. I approached the driver's side, made contact with the driver, later identified as Marcus Riley. I asked for his license and registration. He seemed nervous, wouldn't make eye contact. Is that unusual? In my experience, extreme nervousness during a routine traffic stop often indicates something else is going on. Could be warrants, could be contraband in the vehicle, could be impairment. What did you do? I asked Mr. Riley to step out of the vehicle. He became agitated, started arguing with me. Objection, Martinez said, standing. Officer Reeves is characterizing my client's response. I'd like to hear what was actually said. Sustained, Thompson said. Officer Reeves, please tell us the specific words exchanged. Reeves's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his composure. He said something like, "Why do I have to get out? I didn't do anything wrong." I explained it was for safety reasons. He continued to argue. And then he suddenly reached toward his waistband. I gave him multiple commands to show his hands. He didn't comply immediately, so I had to physically secure him for my safety. During that process, he resisted, and I had to use appropriate force to subdue him and place him in handcuffs. Martinez was writing furiously on her legal pad. "Were you injured during this encounter?" Hutchinson asked. "Minor bruising on my forearm where he grabbed me. Nothing serious." "And was Mr. Riley injured?" "He had some minor scrapes from the ground when I took him down. Standard procedure." Thompson leaned forward slightly. "Officer Reeves, you mentioned Mr. Riley reached for his waistband. Did you find a weapon?" Reeves met his eyes. "No, Your Honor. But in the moment, I had to assume there might be one." "What about contraband drugs, illegal items?" A pause, barely noticeable. "No, Your Honor. So Mr. Riley was ultimately charged only with assaulting an officer and resisting arrest." "That's correct." Thompson made a note. "Continue, Mr. Hutchinson." "Officer Reeves, let's talk about the dashcam video. Is it standard procedure to have that activated during traffic stops?" "Yes, sir. My camera was on for the entire encounter." "And is this video?" Hutchinson held up a flash drive. "An accurate representation of what happened that night." "Yes, sir, it is." "No further questions, Your Honor." Thompson looked at Martinez. "Cross-examination." Martinez stood, and Thompson could see the fire in her eyes. This was what she'd been waiting for. "Officer Reeves." She began walking toward the witness stand, slowly, deliberately. "You said you've made over 400 arrests in 15 years. "That's correct." "And you've had a dozen complaints. All unfounded." "We'll come back to that. How many of those 400 arrests were of black individuals?" Hutchinson stood. "Objection relevance." "Your Honor," Martinez said, "I'm establishing a pattern that speaks to Officer Reeves's credibility and potential bias." Thompson considered. "I'll allow it, but stay focused, Ms. Martinez." "Thank you, Your Honor." She turned back to Reeves. "Do you track the racial demographics of your arrests?" "The department does, ma'am. I don't personally." "Would it surprise you to learn that according to department records, 76% of your arrests have been of black individuals, despite black residents making up only 31% of this city's population?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Thompson raised his hand for silence. Reeves's face reddened. "I don't target anyone based on race. I respond to crime where it happens." "Is that so?" "Let's look at the specific stop that brought us here. You said Mr. Riley's tail light was out and he was weaving in his lane." "Yes." "Did you document the broken tail light in your report?" "I noted it in my initial observations." "But did you photograph it as evidence?" A pause. "No." "Interesting, because Mr. Riley's vehicle was impounded that night, and when his mother picked it up 2 days later, both taillights were functioning perfectly. Do you have an explanation for that? Maybe they got fixed. In impound by whom?" Martinez didn't wait for an answer. "Let's move on to the dashcam video. You testified that it accurately shows what happened. Have you reviewed this video recently?" "Yes, several times." "And you don't notice anything unusual about it?" "No, ma'am." Martinez approached the clerk. "May I have Defense Exhibit A entered into the record, Your Honor?" "So admitted." Martinez pulled up the video on a large screen. "Officer Reeves, this is the dashcam footage. Let's watch it together." The courtroom fell silent as the video played. Thompson watched carefully. It showed Reeves approaching the vehicle, Riley getting out, and then the screen flickered. When it resumed, Riley was already on the ground, Reeves's knee on his back. Martinez paused the video. "Officer Reeves, do you see that flicker, that jump in the footage?" "Technical malfunction, like the prosecutor said." "A technical malfunction that happens to occur during the exact moment you claim Mr. Riley became violent and reached for his waistband, the key moment that justifies all of your actions." "I don't control the camera equipment." No, but you do control the camera itself. You can turn it off and on, can't you? Reeves's eyes narrowed. That's against policy. I didn't ask if it was against policy. I asked if you can do it. Yes, there's a manual override. And that would create a gap in the footage, wouldn't it? Objection? Hutchinson was on his feet. Speculation. Your Honor, Martinez said calmly, I have an expert waiting to testify about exactly this. Thompson nodded. Objection overruled. Continue, Ms. Martinez. Officer Reeves, have you ever turned your camera off during an encounter? Not that I recall. Not that you recall. Martinez let that hang in the air. Let me refresh your memory. Do you remember the arrest of David Washington in March 2023? Reeves's expression hardened. I've made a lot of arrests. David Washington charged with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer, just like Mr. Riley. And in that case, there was also a mysterious gap in your dashcam footage. Do you remember now? That case was dismissed. Yes, it was dismissed because the video evidence was incomplete and your testimony was uncorroborated. Do you remember the arrest of Terrell Johnson in August 2022? Also a black man, also charged with resisting arrest. Also mysterious camera problems. Objection. Hutchinson stood. Your Honor, is this a fishing expedition or... Your Honor. Martinez interrupted. I have documented 7 cases in the past 3 years where Officer Reeves has arrested black men for resisting arrest or assault, and in every single one there are problems with the video evidence. This goes directly to his credibility. Thompson was silent for a moment, and the courtroom held its breath. This was the moment when he had to decide how deep this was going to go. I'll allow it, he said finally. But Ms. Martinez, tie this together soon. Thank you, Your Honor. She turned back to Reeves, who was now gripping the armrests of his chair. Officer Reeves, you've testified that you don't target people based on race. But isn't it true that you have a pattern of escalating minor traffic stops into violent confrontations, primarily with black men, and then justifying your actions with claims that are conveniently not captured on video? That's absolutely false. Reeves's voice rose. I do my job by the book. Do you? Then explain this. Martinez pulled out another document. This is a use of force report from 2021. You claim that a suspect, another black man named Jerome Collins, attacked you during a stop for a broken headlight. You used a taser on him, the video also mysteriously incomplete. I don't have to explain every technical problem with department equipment. No. But you do have to explain why these technical problems only seem to happen when you arrest black men for crimes that conveniently can't be verified. Objection, Hutchinson practically shouted. Badgering the witness. Thompson raised his hand. Sustained. Ms. Martinez, rephrase. But the damage was done. The courtroom was buzzing. Reeves looked like he wanted to leap from the stand. And Thompson could see it, the thin veneer of professionalism cracking, revealing something uglier underneath. Let me ask you this simply, Martinez said, her voice now deadly calm. On the night you arrested Marcus Riley, a 23-year-old college student with no criminal record for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, did you turn off your camera? No. Did you hit him while the camera was off? No. Did you fabricate the assault charge to justify your excessive force? No. Reeves was standing now, his face red. I did my job. I protected myself from a suspect who... A suspect who what? Who had no weapon, no drugs, who's never been arrested before, whose mother was a teacher and whose father was a preacher. What exactly did he do that deserved being slammed to the pavement so hard that he needed stitches? He resisted. He's a young black man who was terrified of a police officer who has a documented history of violence toward people who look exactly like him. Enough. Thompson's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The courtroom froze. Both of you approach the bench, now. Martinez and Hutchinson walked forward. Reeves remained standing by the witness chair, his chest heaving. Thompson leaned forward, his voice low enough that only the attorneys could hear. "Ms. Martinez, you've made your point. Mr. Hutchinson, I suggest you seriously consider the implications of what we've heard here today. We're going to take a 30-minute recess, and when we return, I want everyone to remember that this is a court of law, not a circus. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," they said in unison. Thompson sat back. "This court is in recess. We'll reconvene at 11:00 a.m. The bailiff's voice, "All rise." As Thompson stood and turned toward his chambers, he caught Reeves's eye one more time. The officer was staring at him, with something that looked like recognition finally dawning, and with it fear. But they weren't done, not even close. Thompson closed the door to his chambers and loosened his tie, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The weight of the robe suddenly felt heavier than usual. Through the thick walls, he could still hear the muffled chaos of the courtroom emptying for recess voices raised in heated discussion, reporters probably already calling their editors. James knocked once and entered without waiting. "Judge, that was intense." Thompson finished pouring himself water from the pitcher on his desk. His hand was steady, but his mind was racing. "Get me everything we have on Officer Reeves. Every case he's testified in, every arrest report, every complaint, founded or not. I want it all on my desk within the hour." "Already on it. I pulled the preliminary files when I saw his name on the docket this morning." James set down a thick folder. "Judge, there's something else. While you were in court, I got a call from the public defender's office. They've had 3 other clients in the past year, all young black men, all arrested by Reeves, all with similar circumstances. Camera malfunctions, resisting arrest charges, cases that fell apart under scrutiny." Thompson flipped open the folder, scanning the names. David Washington, Terrell Johnson, Jerome Collins, and now Marcus Riley. 4 young men whose lives had been upended by arrests that didn't hold up, but the process itself was the punishment bail they couldn't afford. Jobs, lost reputations, damaged. What happened to the other 3 cases? 2 dismissed for lack of evidence. 1 pled down to a misdemeanor just to get it over with, even though he maintained his innocence. Thompson set the folder down, his jaw tight. This wasn't just about one traffic stop. This was systematic. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Judge Thompson. This is Linda Reeves, James's wife. Please call me. It's urgent." Thompson stared at the message for a long moment. This was highly irregular, the wife of a witness contacting the judge during trial. Every instinct told him not to respond, but something in the urgency of those words made him hesitate. "James," he said slowly, "I need the room for a few minutes." His clerk understood immediately, gathering his files and slipping out. Thompson waited until the door clicked shut, then dialed the number. She answered on the first ring. "Judge Thompson?" Her voice was strained, frightened. "Mrs. Reeves, you understand that it's inappropriate for us to speak while—" I know, and I'm sorry, but I don't know who else to call. I've been listening to the live updates from the courtroom and I—" She paused, and he could hear her breathing, trying to compose herself. "My husband is not a good man, Judge Thompson, and I think you already know that." Thompson said nothing, letting the silence stretch. "I've lived with his rage for 15 years, she continued, words tumbling out now like she'd been holding them in too long. "I've watched him come home and brag about teaching punks a lesson. I've seen him plant evidence, just little things at first, a baggie here, a weapon there. I've heard him on the phone with other officers, coordinating their stories. And I've stayed quiet because I was scared, because we have 2 kids, because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Mrs. Reeves, but I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after what I saw this morning. Not after he came home last week and told me he was going to put that judge in his place if you didn't rule his way. He said," her voice broke, "he said black judges like you think you're above the law, but he'd show you that a badge means more than a robe." Thompson's blood ran cold. "Did he threaten me specifically?" Not in those exact words, but the intent was clear. Judge Thompson, my husband is dangerous. He believes he's untouchable. And when he feels cornered, he lashes out. I'm scared of what he might do. Are you safe right now? I'm at my sister's house. He doesn't know I'm calling you. But I needed to warn you. And I needed you to know that if you need someone to testify about what really happens behind that badge, I will. I'll risk everything because I can't watch him destroy more lives. Thompson was quiet for a moment, processing. This changed everything and nothing. Linda Reeves's testimony would be explosive, but spouse testimony was complicated, easily dismissed as vindictive. And yet, it corroborated everything Martinez had been building toward. Mrs. Reeves, I appreciate you reaching out, but I can't discuss this case with you. What I can do is direct you to speak with the district attorney's office and the police internal affairs division. Will you do that? Yes, I will. And Mrs. Reeves, if you feel you're in danger, call 911. Don't wait. Don't second-guess yourself. I understand. Thank you, Judge Thompson, for listening, and for not letting him get away with it this time. The line went dead. Thompson sat in the heavy silence of his chambers, staring at the framed law degree on his wall. 25 years of climbing through a system that hadn't been designed for people who looked like him. 25 years of being twice as good to be considered half as equal. And now sitting in judgment over a man who represented everything wrong with that system. A knock at the door. Judge, it's almost time. Thompson stood, straightened his robe, and composed his face into the mask of judicial neutrality. But beneath it, his mind was already 3 moves ahead, calculating how to turn this trial into something larger, not revenge, but revelation. The courtroom had refilled the energy, somehow more charged than before recess. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras banned, but notepads ready. In the gallery, Thompson recognized faces from the community: activists, pastors, people who'd been fighting these battles long before it became national news. Marcus Riley sat at the defense table, his mother behind him, gripping a worn Bible, her lips moving in silent prayer. And Officer Reeves sat ramrod straight in the witness box, his face now carefully blank. Professional. Controlled. But Thompson could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight clench of his jaw. All rise. Thompson took the bench, surveying the room with deliberate calm. Please be seated. Before we continue with cross-examination, I want to address what happened before recess. This court will maintain decorum. Ms. Martinez, you will question the witness without theatrical accusations. Officer Reeves, you will answer questions calmly and completely. Are we understood? Yes, Your Honor, Martinez said. Reeves nodded stiffly. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Ms. Martinez, you may continue. Martinez stood, but her approach was different now, less aggressive, more surgical. Officer Reeves, let's talk about your training. You've completed the department's mandatory implicit bias training, correct? Yes, ma'am. Every officer has. And what did you learn from that training? Reeves shifted slightly. That we should treat everyone equally, regardless of race, gender, or other factors. Do you believe you do that? Yes, I do. Yet the statistics show that 76% of your arrests are of black individuals in a city that's only 31% black. How do you explain that disparity? Like I said earlier, I respond to crime where it occurs. The neighborhoods I patrol have higher crime rates, and those neighborhoods happen to have higher populations of... He caught himself, rephrased. Higher populations of minorities. I see. So you're assigned to patrol predominantly black neighborhoods. Among others, yes. And in these neighborhoods, you make traffic stops for things like broken taillights and minor traffic violations. That's part of police work. Yes, small violations can lead to bigger discoveries. Bigger discoveries like finding drugs or weapons. Sometimes. How often? Martinez pulled out another document. According to your arrest records, you've made 127 traffic stops in the past 3 years. Of those stops, how many resulted in finding actual contraband or evidence of serious crimes? Reeves hesitated. I'd have to review my records to give you an exact number. Let me help you. The answer is 11. 11 out of 127. That's less than 9%, which means 91% of the time you're stopping people, predominantly black people, and finding nothing. That's how police work functions. You can't know what you'll find until you investigate. But you can choose who to investigate, can't you? Martinez moved closer. Let me ask you this. On the night you stopped Marcus Riley, how many other cars did you see with equipment violations? I don't recall specifically. You don't recall? It was only 4 months ago. Did you see any other cars with broken taillights? Possibly. Did you stop them? A pause. No. Why not? I stopped the first one I saw. Or did you stop the one that fit your profile? Martinez didn't wait for an answer. Officer Reeves, have you ever heard of the term driving while black? Objection, Hutchinson said, rising. Calls for speculation. Your Honor, I'm asking about the officer's awareness of a well-documented phenomenon, Martinez countered. Thompson considered. I'll allow it. Officer Reeves. Reeves's expression hardened. I've heard the phrase. I don't believe it applies to my work. You don't believe that black drivers are disproportionately stopped by police. I believe that criminals come in all colors, and I enforce the law equally. Then explain Jerome Collins to me. Martinez pulled up a photo on the screen, a young black man in a graduation cap and gown. 26 years old, accountant, no criminal record. You stopped him in August 2022 for weaving in his lane. Your report says he became belligerent, and you had to forcibly remove him from his vehicle. He says you yanked him out, slammed him against the hood, and told him to stop acting like a thug. The dashcam video conveniently has a 2-minute gap right during that interaction. He spent the night in jail, lost his job because he missed a major client presentation. The charges dropped 3 months later. Do you remember Jerome Collins? Reeves was gripping the armrests again. I remember that stop. He was aggressive. He's 5'8" and 160 pounds. You're 6'2" and 230 pounds. You felt threatened. Size doesn't determine threat level. No, but pattern determines bias. And your pattern is clear. You target black men. You escalate routine stops into violent confrontations. And then you justify it with claims that can't be verified because your camera mysteriously malfunctions. Martinez's voice rose slightly. Tell me, Officer Reeves, how many white men have you arrested for resisting arrest in the past 3 years? Reeves's jaw worked. I don't memorize statistics by race. The answer is 2. 2 white men out of 47 total arrests for resisting arrest. Do you really expect this court to believe that's just coincidence? Objection. Hutchinson was on his feet. Your Honor, these statistics are being taken out of context. Context. Martinez whirled on him. The context is systemic racism dressed up in a uniform. The context is that young black men in this city can't drive to work or school without fear of being stopped, harassed, and brutalized by officers who face no consequences. The courtroom erupted. Thompson's gavel came down hard. Order, Ms. Martinez. I understand your passion, but you will address your arguments to the witness, not the prosecutor. Mr. Hutchinson, sit down. Everyone else, another outburst, and I will clear this courtroom. Silence fell, tense and crackling with electricity. Thompson leaned forward. Officer Reeves, I'm going to ask you directly. Have you ever falsified a police report? Every eye in the room turned to him. Judges rarely questioned witnesses directly, but Thompson was done watching from the sidelines. Reeves met his gaze. No, Your Honor. Have you ever turned off your dashcam during an arrest? Not intentionally. That's not what I asked. Have you ever for any reason manually disabled your camera during an encounter with a citizen? The pause was infinitesimal, but Thompson caught it. So did everyone else. There may have been times when the equipment malfunctioned, and I had to reset it. During an active encounter, sometimes the camera would freeze and I'd have to restart it, yes. And during those restarts, there would be gaps in the footage. Reeves's face was flushed now. I suppose so, yes. How convenient. Thompson sat back. Ms. Martinez, do you have further questions? Just one more, Your Honor. She turned back to Reeves. Officer, do you think black people are more likely to be criminals than white people? Objection! Hutchinson shouted. That's inflammatory and— Answer the question, Officer Reeves, Thompson said quietly. Reeves looked at Hutchinson, then at Thompson, then back at Martinez. I think that crime statistics show that certain communities have higher rates of criminal activity. That's not what I asked. I asked what you personally believe. Do you believe that a black man is more likely to be a criminal than a white man? The courtroom held its breath. I believe, Reeves said slowly, carefully, that my experience has shown me that in certain neighborhoods which happen to be predominantly black, there is more criminal activity. Whether that's because of race, or because of poverty, or because of other factors I couldn't say. But you act as if race is the determining factor. You see a black man driving through your district and you assume criminality. You assume threat. You assume guilt. And then you create circumstances that justify your assumptions. That's not true. Isn't it Marcus Riley was driving home from his evening class at the community college? He's studying business management. He's never been arrested, never been in trouble, volunteers at his church. But you saw a young black man in an older car and you decided he was a criminal. You manufactured a reason to stop him, and when that stop didn't yield the contraband you manufactured a reason to arrest him. And you've been doing this for years. Reeves stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. I've served this city with honor. Sit down, Officer Reeves. Thompson's voice cut through like thunder. You are under oath in my courtroom, and you will remain seated until you are excused. Do you understand? Reeves dropped back into the chair, his face mottled red and white with fury. Thompson turned to Martinez. Are you finished with this witness? Yes, Your Honor. Redirect Mr. Hutchinson. The prosecutor stood slowly, clearly trying to salvage what he could. Officer Reeves, despite the defense's characterizations, you've served this community for 15 years, correct? Yes, sir. And you've received commendations for bravery and service? Yes, sir. 3 commendations. And in all those years, have you ever been formally disciplined? Reeves straightened slightly. No, sir. Thank you. No further questions. Thompson made a note. No formal discipline didn't mean no misconduct, it meant no accountability. Officer Reeves, you're excused, for now. Reeves stood, his movements jerky, with barely suppressed anger. As he passed the bench, Thompson heard him mutter just loud enough to carry, "This is bullshit." Thompson's gavel came down, once sharp as a gunshot. Officer Reeves approached the bench immediately. Reeves froze, then slowly turned back. The entire courtroom seemed to lean forward. Did you just use profanity in my courtroom? Thompson asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I was speaking to myself, Your Honor. You were speaking in my courtroom, which means you were speaking to everyone present. Do you have something you'd like to say to this court? Reeves's eyes were hard. With respect, Your Honor, I feel like I'm on trial here instead of, you're not on trial. Officer Reeves, you're under oath testifying in a case where your credibility is directly at issue. If you don't like having your record examined, perhaps you should have kept a cleaner record. Now I'm going to give you one opportunity to apologize to this court for your outburst, or I'm going to hold you in contempt. Your choice. The silence stretched. Thompson could see the calculation in Reeves's eyes. Pride versus pragmatism, anger versus survival. Finally, through gritted teeth, I apologize to the court. Accepted. You're dismissed. Reeves walked out, his partner Rodriguez following quickly behind. The door closed with a heavy thud. Thompson looked at the clock. It's now 12:15. We're going to break for lunch. When we return at 2:00 p.m., the defense will present their expert witness on the video evidence. This court is in recess. As the bailiff called for everyone to rise, Thompson caught Marcus Riley's eye. The young man looked exhausted, overwhelmed, but there was something else there too. Maybe the first glimmer of hope that someone was actually listening, actually seeing him as human rather than a suspect. Thompson gathered his files and headed back to chambers. James was waiting with a sandwich he knew Thompson wouldn't eat, and news he knew Thompson needed to hear. "Judge, while you were in court, Internal Affairs called. They want to open a formal investigation into Officer Reeves. The video expert is here and ready to testify, and—" James hesitated. "There's a woman in the waiting room. Says her name is Linda Reeves, and she needs to speak with you." Thompson closed his eyes briefly. The machine was in motion now, and there was no stopping it. "Tell Mrs. Reeves that I cannot speak with her directly, but that she should speak with the district attorney immediately. And James, call the court security. Tell them I want extra officers present for the afternoon session." "You think Reeves might—" "I think a man who's built his identity on a badge and a gun, who's suddenly watching that identity get dismantled in public, is capable of anything. I'd rather be overly cautious than regretful." James nodded and left. Thompson sat at his desk surrounded by files documenting 15 years of a man's career and 15 years of lives disrupted by that career. Somewhere in this city, Marcus Riley's mother was probably sitting in a church praying for justice. Jerome Collins was probably at a new job, still carrying the weight of an arrest that should never have happened. David Washington, Terrell Johnson, and too many others were living with the invisible scars of a system that saw them as threats before it saw them as citizens. And William Thompson, who'd spent his entire career trying to be the bridge between law and justice, was now the judge who had to decide if that bridge could hold the weight of truth. His phone buzzed. A text from an old friend, a civil rights attorney he'd worked with years ago, watching the live updates. "You're doing the right thing, but be careful. Men like Reeves don't go quietly." Thompson didn't respond. He was already acutely aware of the risk, but he was more aware of the cost of silence. At 1:55 p.m., he put his robe back on and walked toward the courtroom. The hallways were more crowded now, word had spread. There were faces he recognized from other courthouses, other protests, other battles in the long war for equality under law. As he reached for the door handle, he heard footsteps behind him. Fast, purposeful. He turned. Officer Reeves stood 10 feet away out of uniform, now wearing jeans and a jacket. His eyes were wild. "Judge Thompson," he said, and his voice had none of the professional courtesy from earlier. "You think you're so much better than me. You think because you got a degree and a robe, you can destroy a man's life." Thompson didn't move. "Officer Reeves, you should not be here. If you have concerns, you need to address them through proper channels." Reeves laughed bitterly. "Like the ones I followed for 15 years, while people like you sat in your offices and judged people like me who actually do the work. People like you." Thompson's voice was steady. "Or people like us." The question hung in the air. Reeves's face twisted. "You know what I mean," he said. "Yes," Thompson replied quietly. "I know exactly what you mean. And that's the problem." Reeves took a step forward. Thompson held his ground. Security was 30 seconds away if he called. But 30 seconds was a long time. "You've destroyed my career," Reeves said. "My reputation. Everything I've built." "No, Officer Reeves. You destroyed those things yourself every time you let your bias override your duty. I'm just the one making sure everyone else can see it. You're going to regret this. Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." The door opened, and 2 courthouse security officers emerged, hands on their weapons. "Everything okay here, Judge Thompson?" Thompson never took his eyes off Reeves. "Officer Reeves was just leaving. Weren't you, officer?" For a moment, Thompson thought Reeves might actually do something stupid. But then the anger seemed to drain out of him, replaced by something that looked like devastation. He turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, and Thompson realized he'd just watched a man confront the ruins of his own making. "Judge, should we detain him?" one of the security officers asked. "No, but make sure he leaves the building and doesn't come back today." Thompson straightened his robe. "And gentlemen, stay close this afternoon. I have a feeling things are about to get more complicated." Thompson entered the courtroom with the security officers flanking him, a silent message to everyone present that the stakes had just risen. The afternoon crowd was even larger than the morning session, bodies packed into every available seat. Standing room only along the back wall. He could feel the electricity in the air, that particular tension that comes when people sense they're witnessing something historic. Marcus Riley sat at the defense table, his hands folded in front of him, but Thompson could see the tremor in his fingers. The young man's mother had moved closer, her hand resting on her son's shoulder, like she could shield him from whatever was coming next. At the prosecution table, Hutchinson looked pale, shuffling papers without really seeing them. He'd been a prosecutor for 20 years, long enough to know when a case was slipping through his fingers like water. "All rise." Thompson took his seat, scanning the room. Officer Reeves was nowhere to be seen, but his partner Rodriguez sat in the gallery, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Good. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him wonder if his own career was about to unravel alongside his partner's. "Please be seated. Ms. Martinez, call your next witness." Martinez stood, and Thompson could see the careful control in her posture. She knew this was the moment that would either vindicate everything she'd been arguing or reduce it to speculation. "Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Rachel Kim." The woman who walked to the witness stand looked nothing like what most people expected from a digital forensics expert. She was barely 30, wearing a simple blazer and glasses, carrying a laptop under one arm. But Thompson had reviewed her credentials that morning: PhD from MIT, former FBI consultant, expert testimony in 43 cases, with a perfect record of having her findings upheld on appeal. After she was sworn in, Martinez approached with the same careful precision she'd used all day. "Dr. Kim, please state your occupation and qualifications for the record." "I'm a digital forensics specialist with Veritas Technology Solutions. I have a doctorate in computer science with a focus on digital video analysis and authentication. I've worked on cases involving surveillance footage, body camera video, and dashcam evidence for law enforcement agencies, defense attorneys, and federal prosecutors." "How many times have you testified as an expert witness?" "This will be my 44th time." "And have your findings ever been successfully challenged on appeal?" "No, they have not." Martinez pulled up the dashcam video on the courtroom screen. "Dr. Kim, have you had the opportunity to examine the dashcam footage from Officer Reeves's vehicle from the night of June 14, 2024? "I have. I received a copy of the file 3 weeks ago and have conducted a comprehensive analysis." "What did that analysis reveal?" Dr. Kim opened her laptop, connecting it to the courtroom's display system. The video shows clear evidence of manual manipulation. Specifically, there's a gap of 4 minutes and 17 seconds where the recording was deliberately stopped and then restarted. Hutchinson was on his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is stating a conclusion without explaining her methodology." "I was getting to that," Dr. Kim said calmly, turning to Thompson. "May I explain?" "Please do," Thompson said. Dr. Kim pulled up a series of technical displays on the screen. Dashcam systems, like the one used by the Monroe City Police Department, record continuously once activated. They create metadata, essentially timestamps and technical information that runs alongside the visual recording. Think of it like a diary that the camera keeps about its own activity. She highlighted a section of code on the screen. When a camera malfunctions, a true technical glitch, the metadata shows specific error codes. Power failure, memory corruption, file system errors. These leave distinct digital fingerprints. But when a camera is manually turned off using the override button that Officer Reeves confirmed exists, the metadata shows something different. It shows a clean stop command, followed by a clean start command. And what did you find in this footage? Clean stop and start commands. No error codes. No malfunction signatures. Just manual intervention. She pulled up a timeline. At 9:47 and 23 seconds p.m. the recording stops. At 9:51 and 40 seconds p.m. it restarts. During those 4 minutes and 17 seconds, according to Officer Reeves's own report, Mr. Riley allegedly became violent, reached for his waistband, and had to be forcibly subdued. But we have no video evidence of any of that because the camera was deliberately turned off. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Thompson raised his hand for silence, but didn't use his gavel. He wanted people to understand the weight of what they'd just heard. Kim, Thompson interjected. Is there any scenario where these findings could be consistent with an accidental malfunction? She turned to face him directly. No, Your Honor. The probability of a malfunction producing this exact pattern is statistically impossible. We're talking about odds of roughly 1 in 10 million. This was deliberate human action. Thank you. Continue, Ms. Martinez. Dr. Kim, were you able to determine what might have happened during those missing 4 minutes? Not with certainty, but I can make some inferences based on what we see immediately before and after the gap. Before the stop, we see Mr. Riley complying with Officer Reeves's instructions. Hands visible, no aggressive movements. After the restart, we see Mr. Riley on the ground, facial injuries visible, and Officer Reeves's knee on his back. The transformation from cooperative citizen to subdued suspect happens entirely during that missing footage. In your professional opinion, why would an officer turn off his camera during an arrest? Hutchinson objected again. Calls for speculation. Your Honor. Martinez countered. Dr. Kim has analyzed hundreds of cases involving police video. Her professional experience is directly relevant to understanding common patterns. Thompson nodded. I'll allow it. Dr. Kim. In my experience, officers turn off cameras for one of 3 reasons. 1, they're about to do something they know they shouldn't. 2, they're about to use force that exceeds department guidelines. Or 3, they're about to engage in behavior that would undermine their official account of events. In legitimate arrests, with justified force, officers want that footage. It protects them. When they turn cameras off, it's almost always because the recording would contradict their narrative. Martinez let that statement hang in the air for a moment. Dr. Kim, did you examine any other video evidence from Officer Reeves's cases? I did. The defense provided me with footage from 6 other arrests over the past 3 years. All 6 showed the same pattern: clean stop and start commands during critical moments of the arrest. All 6 involved use of force. All 6 involved young black men. And all 6 had official reports claiming technical malfunctions. The room exploded. Thompson's gavel came down hard this time. Order, I will have order. But the damage was done. In the gallery, Thompson saw faces filled with fury, vindication, grief. This wasn't just about Marcus Riley anymore. This was about every black parent who'd warned their children about police, every young man who'd been told to keep his hands visible and his voice calm, every family who'd gotten a call that their son was in jail for resisting arrest. Hutchinson looked like he wanted to crawl under his table. Instead, he stood slowly. Your Honor, may I approach the bench? You may. Martinez joined them. The 3 spoke in low voices, while the court reporter's fingers flew across her machine. Your Honor. Hutchinson began, his voice strained. I need to request a continuance. This testimony raises serious questions that the state needs time to investigate. The state has had 4 months to investigate, Martinez shot back. 4 months since they charged my client. They had access to this same video evidence. If they chose not to examine it closely, that's not grounds for a continuance. Ms. Martinez is right, Thompson said quietly. But, Mr. Hutchinson, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Do you want to continue with this trial, or do you want to dismiss these charges and recommend that Internal Affairs conduct a full investigation into Officer Reeves? Hutchinson's face went through a series of expressions: frustration, calculation, resignation. I need to consult with my supervisor. You have until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to file a motion. Until then, we continue. Step back. The attorneys returned to their tables. Thompson addressed the courtroom. Dr. Kim, I have a few questions for you. You stated that you examined 6 other cases involving Officer Reeves. Did you find any cases where his camera functioned properly throughout an arrest? Yes, Your Honor. Approximately 70% of his arrests show continuous, uninterrupted footage. And in those cases, can you identify any demographic patterns? Dr. Kim consulted her notes. Of the arrests with complete footage, 82% involved white suspects. Of the arrests with gaps or malfunctions, 94% involved black suspects. Thompson let that statistic breathe for a moment. Mathematics didn't lie. Neither did digital forensics. One more question. In your professional opinion, is it possible for one officer to experience this many camera malfunctions by chance? No, Your Honor. The probability is so low it's essentially zero. This is systematic manipulation. Thank you, Dr. Kim. Mr. Hutchinson cross-examination. Hutchinson rose slowly, and Thompson almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The prosecutor was about to try to discredit ironclad scientific evidence, and they both knew it was futile. Dr. Kim, you've never worked for the Monroe City Police Department, correct? Correct. So you're not familiar with their specific equipment or its particular quirks. I'm familiar with the WatchGuard DV1 system they use. It's one of the most common dashcam systems in law enforcement. I've analyzed footage from this exact model in 37 previous cases. But you can't say with absolute certainty that these weren't legitimate malfunctions. I can say with scientific certainty that the probability of legitimate malfunctions producing this exact pattern this many times with this demographic correlation is effectively impossible. If you're asking me if there's a 1 in 10 million chance I'm wrong, then technically no, I cannot provide absolute certainty. But science rarely deals in absolutes. It deals in probabilities. And the probability here is clear. Hutchinson had nowhere to go. No further questions. Redirect? Thompson asked Martinez. No, Your Honor. The evidence speaks for itself. Thompson dismissed Dr. Kim and checked the time. It was 3:30 p.m. The trial had been going for 6 hours, but it felt like 6 minutes and 6 years simultaneously. Ms. Martinez, do you have additional witnesses? Your Honor, I'd like to call Linda Reeves to the stand. The courtroom went silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. Hutchinson was up instantly. Objection. Your Honor, this witness was not disclosed in discovery. She contacted me during lunch recess, Martinez said. I'm invoking the rule for rebuttal witnesses. Her testimony directly responds to Officer Reeves's characterization of his conduct. Thompson knew he was on shaky ground procedurally. Spouse testimony was complicated. Disclosure rules existed for good reasons. But justice sometimes required flexibility within the boundaries of law. Mr. Hutchinson, has your office been contacted by Mrs. Reeves today? I believe someone from Internal Affairs mentioned that she called, but then you've had notice. I'm going to allow the testimony, but Ms. Martinez, keep it focused on the specific issues before this court. Yes, Your Honor. Linda Reeves walked into the courtroom like she was walking to the gallows. She was in her early 40s, thin with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Her hands shook as she placed one on the Bible. After she was sworn in and seated, Martinez approached gently. This was a woman on the edge, and everyone could see it. Mrs. Reeves, thank you for coming forward. I know this isn't easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Can you state your relationship to Officer James Reeves? I'm his wife. We've been married for 16 years. And do you live together? We did. I left 3 days ago. Why did you leave? Linda took a shaky breath. Because I was afraid. Of what he'd become. Of what he'd do when the truth came out. What truth, Mrs. Reeves? That my husband is not the officer he pretends to be. That he's been planting evidence, manipulating reports, and using excessive force for years, and that I've known about it and said nothing. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Thompson watched her carefully. She wasn't looking at anyone, just staring at her hands in her lap. Mrs. Reeves, I need to ask you very specifically. Have you personally witnessed your husband engage in misconduct? Yes, many times. He keeps files at home. His own files separate from the department's. He calls them his insurance. Arrest reports that don't match what he filed officially. Photos of suspects that show more injuries than what's documented. Audio recordings he made on his phone during arrests. Martinez pulled out her phone. Your Honor, Mrs. Reeves provided me with several files during the lunch recess. I'd like to enter them as evidence. Objection. Hutchinson looked panicked now. Chain of custody authenticity. Your Honor, Mrs. Reeves is willing to testify that these files came directly from her husband's personal safe. I have metadata showing they were created on dates corresponding to specific arrests. I'm not asking the court to accept them as proven fact, but as evidence that warrants immediate investigation. Thompson considered. This was moving fast, maybe too fast. But speed was sometimes necessary when the alternative was letting a dangerous officer remain on the streets. I'll accept them provisionally. Continue. Mrs. Reeves, are any of these files related to the arrest of Marcus Riley? Linda nodded, reaching into her purse with trembling hands. She pulled out a small USB drive. This one. James recorded the whole thing on his phone. The real version. The courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Martinez took the drive, held it up. Your Honor, may I play this recording? Yes. Martinez connected the drive to the courtroom system. There was a moment of static, and then Officer Reeves's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. License and registration. Yes, officer. Can I ask why I was pulled over? Marcus Riley's voice, young and uncertain. Your taillight's out. But now that I've got a closer look at you, I'm thinking there might be more going on. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, I don't understand. I said step out. Don't make me ask again. The sound of a car door opening. Footsteps. Turn around. Hands on the hood. What did I do? You're in a high-crime area driving a vehicle that matches the description of one involved in a robbery. What robbery, officer? I'm just coming from class. Don't talk back to me, son. You got ID. I gave you my license. Don't get smart. You people always think you can argue your way out of everything. A pause. Then Marcus's voice, quieter now. You people? Yeah, you people. Young black guys in nice cars, they probably can't afford cruising through my district. I know what you're doing out here. I live 3 blocks from here. I was driving home from community college. Community college? Right, what are you studying? Advanced drug dealing. The recording cut out briefly, then resumed with sounds of a scuffle. Marcus's voice. You don't have to. Then a sharp sound, unmistakably, a fist hitting flesh. A grunt of pain. The thud of a body hitting the ground. Reeves's voice. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. Rodriguez. You see him go for his waist. You saw that, right? Rodriguez's voice, uncertain. Yeah, I saw it. Good. Make sure that's in your report. And somebody turn this damn phone off. No, wait, I got it. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Thompson looked at Marcus Riley and saw tears streaming down the young man's face. His mother had her hand over her mouth, body shaking with silent sobs. In the gallery, people were crying openly, faces contorted with rage and grief and validation of every fear they'd ever had about what happened when the cameras were off. Thompson felt something break open inside his chest, a fury he'd kept carefully controlled for decades of navigating a system that required black judges to be twice as calm, twice as measured, twice as perfect. Mrs. Reeves. He said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Are you testifying that your husband made this recording and that it accurately represents what occurred during the arrest of Marcus Riley?" "Yes, Your Honor. He keeps recordings like this. He says they're proof of what really happens on the streets in case anyone ever tries to second-guess him. He never thought anyone would hear them except him." "And you provided this recording to the defense attorney, knowing it would destroy your husband's career and possibly your marriage?" "Yes." Linda looked up, meeting Thompson's eyes for the first time. "Because I can't watch him hurt anyone else. Because I can't be complicit anymore. Because I have 2 teenage sons and I don't want them growing up thinking this is what justice looks like." Thompson nodded slowly. Then he turned to the bailiff. "Contact courthouse security. I want Officer James Reeves located immediately. If he's left the building, contact the police chief directly. Tell them we have evidence of perjury assault under color of authority and civil rights violations. I want him in custody within the hour." "Your Honor," Hutchinson said, standing on shaky legs. The state needs to withdraw all charges against Marcus Riley immediately. We also need to recommend a full investigation into every arrest Officer Reeves has made in the past 5 years." "Recommended and ordered," Thompson said. "Mr. Riley, please stand." Marcus stood slowly, looking confused, like he was afraid to believe what was happening. "Marcus Riley, the charges against you are dismissed with prejudice. This court finds that you were the victim of an unlawful arrest, excessive force, and a malicious prosecution. You are free to go, and I strongly encourage you to pursue civil remedies against Officer Reeves and the Monroe City Police Department." Marcus collapsed back into his chair, and his mother threw her arms around him, both of them sobbing now. Martinez had tears in her eyes too, but she was already gathering files, already thinking about the next steps. Thompson stood. "This court is in recess pending the location and arrest of James Reeves. Court will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for an emergency hearing on the status of all cases involving Officer Reeves. Bailiff, clear the courtroom in an orderly fashion." But before anyone could move, the back doors of the courtroom burst open. Officer Rodriguez stood there, out of breath, his face ashen. "Judge Thompson. Officer Reeves, he's in the parking garage. He's got a gun, and he's saying he won't be taken alive." The courtroom erupted into chaos. People were shouting, some trying to rush toward the exits, others frozen in their seats. Thompson's gavel came down like thunder, 3 sharp cracks that somehow cut through the pandemonium. "Everyone remain calm and stay seated." His voice carried the full weight of judicial authority, but underneath it was something else, a command born from years of being the steady hand in the storm. "Rodriguez, how many people are in that garage?" The young officer was pale, sweating despite the courthouse air conditioning. "I don't know, sir. Could be dozens. It's shift change, people coming and going." "Has anyone been hurt?" "Not yet, but he's waving the gun around, shouting about how everyone betrayed him. Judge Thompson, he specifically mentioned you. He said—" Rodriguez's voice cracked. "He said you destroyed his life, and you're going to pay for it." Thompson felt every eye in the room turn to him. In the gallery, he saw fear, concern, but also something else, people waiting to see what a black judge would do when directly threatened by a white police officer who'd built his career on the same kind of violence that had oppressed communities for generations. "Bailiff, contact the police chief immediately. I want crisis negotiators and tactical units here now. Rodriguez, you're with me." "Judge Thompson, with all due respect, you can't go down there." Martinez was on her feet, her voice urgent. "Someone has to, and it should be me. He's not going to hurt innocent people because of me." Thompson was already removing his robe, hanging it carefully on the back of his chair, like he was just taking a normal recess. His hands were steady, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Your Honor, please." That was Marcus Riley's mother standing now, her face etched with concern. "You saved my boy. Don't let that man take you from us." Thompson met her eyes. "Ma'am, your son is free because the truth came out. But truth without courage is just words. I need you to trust me." He turned to the security officers flanking the courtroom. Clear this room systematically. Get everyone to the east wing away from the parking garage. No one leaves the building until we have this situation contained. Judge, I'm coming with you, Martinez said firmly. No, you're not. You're an officer of this court, but you're not trained for this. I need you here making sure everyone gets out safely. He softened his tone. Catherine, I need to know someone I trust is protecting these people. Can you do that? She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Be careful. Thompson walked toward the exit, Rodriguez trailing behind him. As they left the courtroom, he could hear Martinez's voice organizing the evacuation strong and clear. Behind them, the murmurs of 100 frightened people faded as they moved deeper into the courthouse corridors. Rodriguez, Thompson said as they walked, tell me the truth. How long have you known about what Reeves was doing? The young officer's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. We'll deal with that later. Right now I need to know, is he capable of killing someone? Rodriguez's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. 2 years ago I would have said no way. Now I honestly don't know. He's been different lately. Angrier, more paranoid. He kept saying people were out to get him, that the department was going to sacrifice him to look good. Was he wrong? What? Thompson stopped at the stairwell door leading down to the garage. Was he wrong to think the department would sacrifice him rather than address the systemic problems that enabled him? Rodriguez looked stricken. Judge Thompson, I don't. Never mind. Stay behind me and let me do the talking. If shooting starts, you get behind cover, and you don't fire unless I'm down, and he's aiming at someone else. Understood. Sir, I can't let you. Officer Rodriguez, I'm not asking. I'm telling you. If this turns into a shootout in a crowded garage, people will die. Our only chance is de-escalation, and the only person who might be able to reach him right now is me. Now are you with me or not? Rodriguez swallowed hard, then nodded. I'm with you. They descended the stairs in silence. Thompson's mind was racing, but his body was calm. He'd learned long ago that fear was just information your body telling you to pay attention to be smart to survive. He'd felt this same fear walking through his neighborhood as a teenager when the wrong gang colors could get you killed. He'd felt it as a young prosecutor facing down drug dealers who'd threatened his family. He'd felt it every time he put on this robe, knowing that some people would see it as proof he didn't belong there. Fear was an old companion. He knew how to work with it. The stairwell opened onto the second level of the parking garage. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows between concrete pillars and rows of parked cars. Thompson could hear Reeves before he saw him, a voice echoing off the walls, raw and broken. Everything I did for this city. 15 years, putting my life on the line while people like him sit in their comfortable offices and judge me. Thompson stepped out slowly, hands visible, moving carefully around a pickup truck until he had a clear view. Reeves stood about 50 feet away near the garage entrance ramp. He was in his civilian clothes gun in his right hand, but pointed at the ground. His left hand was pressed against his forehead like he was trying to hold his skull together. 3 civilian cars were stopped on the ramp, their occupants frozen inside, afraid to move. Officer Reeves, Thompson called out, his voice calm and carrying. My name is Judge William Thompson. I'm unarmed and I'm here to talk. Reeves spun toward him, the gun coming up. For a moment, Thompson was staring directly down the barrel, and time seemed to slow. He could see Reeves's hand shaking, could see the tears streaming down the man's face, could see the absolute devastation of someone watching their entire identity crumble. You, Reeves said, and his voice was thick with emotion. This is all your fault. Is it? Thompson took another slow step forward. Behind him, he could hear Rodriguez's sharp intake of breath. Or is this the result of 15 years of choices you made, and today was just the day those choices caught up with you? I was doing my job. I was keeping this city safe. From who, James? From college students driving home from class, from accountants guilty of nothing but driving while black. from young men whose only crime was existing in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. You don't know what it's like out there. Reeves's voice cracked. You sit in your courtroom in your fancy robe, but you don't see what I see every day. The drugs, the violence, the people who don't respect anything. I grew up 3 miles from here, Thompson interrupted, taking another step. In the West Side projects, the same neighborhood you patrolled. I know exactly what it's like out there, James. I know because I lived it. The difference is, I never let it make me into someone who hurt people I was supposed to protect. That's different. How? Because you had a badge. Because you wore a uniform that didn't give you the right to brutalize people. It gave you the responsibility to serve them, all of them, not just the ones who look like you. Reeves was shaking his head violently now, the gun waving erratically. Thompson could see the people in the cars ducking down, trying to make themselves small. His heart was pounding, but he kept his voice level. James, I need you to think about your family, your wife, your sons. They're going to remember this moment for the rest of their lives. What do you want that memory to be? Linda left me. It came out as a sob. My own wife turned against me, gave you those recordings. She destroyed me. No, James, she saved you. She stopped you from destroying anyone else. That took courage, more courage than you showed in 15 years behind a badge. I don't have anything left. My career, my reputation, my family, it's all gone. You still have your life. You still have the chance to face what you've done, to take responsibility, to maybe someday make some kind of amends. But if you hurt someone today, if you pull that trigger, you lose even that. You become exactly what you've been afraid people thought you were all along. Thompson was 15 feet away now. He could see Reeves's face clearly, the bloodshot eyes, the stubble, the deep lines of a man who hadn't slept well in a long time. This was a human being, broken and dangerous, but still human. I can't go to prison, Reeves whispered. You know what they'd do to cops in prison. I'll be dead in a week. Maybe. Or maybe you'll live long enough to understand the fear you put into every person you arrested. Maybe you'll finally understand what it feels like to be powerless in a system that doesn't see you as fully human. Is that what you want, revenge? No, James. I want justice. And justice means you face consequences for your actions, not death. Accountability. Reeves's gun hand was trembling so badly now that Thompson worried it might discharge accidentally. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the villain. You're not the villain, James. You're a man who did terrible things because he was operating in a system that enabled him, trained him, and looked the other way. You're a symptom of something bigger. But that doesn't absolve you. It just means that when you fall, you're going to bring a lot of other people down with you. The question is, whether you fall with dignity or whether you take innocent lives with you. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Reeves heard them too, and panic flashed across his face. They're coming! They're going to kill me! Not if you surrender to me, right now. You put that gun on the ground, you put your hands on your head, and you let me walk you out of here. I give you my word that you will be treated fairly, that you will have your day in court, that you will be judged by the same system you served. Not perfectly, James, but fairly. Why should I trust you? Thompson laughed, a short, bitter sound. Because I'm the one person in this building who actually understands how you got here. I've seen good cops turned bad by quotas and pressure and a culture that rewards arrests over justice. I've seen the system chew people up and spit them out. The difference is, I chose to try to fix it from the inside. You chose to exploit it. But we both know how it works, and we both know that right now, I'm your best chance. Reeves was crying openly now, the gun still in his hand, but pointing at nothing. Those recordings Linda gave you, the one with Marcus Riley, did you hear all of it? Yes. Then you heard what I really think, what I really believe about people like you. I did. And you're still here trying to save me. Thompson moved closer now, just 10 feet away. I'm not trying to save you, James. I'm trying to save the people in those cars who are terrified right now. I'm trying to save Rodriguez, who's probably going to have nightmares about this for years. I'm trying to save this community from another trauma. And yes, I'm trying to save you from yourself, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let your hatred turn me into someone I'm not. The sirens were very close now. In moments, the garage would be filled with SWAT teams and snipers and people with itchy trigger fingers. Thompson took another step. Last chance, James. Put the gun down. Let me walk you out. Face what you've done like a man instead of dying like a coward. Something shifted in Reeves's face. The anger drained away, leaving only exhaustion. His arm dropped slowly, and the gun clattered to the concrete. He sank to his knees, hands going to his head, and the sound that came from him was somewhere between a sob and a wail, the sound of a man confronting the ruins of everything he'd built his identity on. Thompson walked forward carefully, picked up the gun, and ejected the magazine with practiced efficiency. He handed it to Rodriguez, who'd appeared at his elbow, looking shell-shocked. "Officer Rodriguez, you are to place James Reeves under arrest for assault, perjury, civil rights violations, and terroristic threats. Read him his rights." Rodriguez's hands shook as he pulled out his handcuffs. "James Reeves, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Rodriguez continued the Miranda warning, Thompson turned to the cars on the ramp. "It's safe now. You can leave. Thank you for your patience." The cars started their engines and carefully navigated past them, the drivers looking at Thompson with expressions he couldn't quite read: gratitude, awe, confusion that a judge had just talked down an armed officer. More police cars were screaming into the garage now, officers piling out with weapons drawn. Thompson raised his hands. "The situation is contained. The weapon has been secured. I am Judge William Thompson, and this man is in custody." The police chief himself came running over a short, barrel-chested man named Marcus Hayes, who'd been appointed 6 months earlier with a mandate to reform the department. He looked at Reeves kneeling on the ground at Rodriguez, holding the handcuffs at Thompson, standing calm in the middle of it all. "Judge Thompson, what the hell happened here?" "What happened, Chief Hayes, is that one of your officers had a mental breakdown after being exposed for years of misconduct, civil rights violations, and systematic brutality against black citizens. He's now in custody and needs to be transported to a secure facility where he can be processed and evaluated. I also need you to immediately suspend Officer Rodriguez pending investigation into his role in covering up Officer Reeves's misconduct." Rodriguez's face went white. "Judge Thompson, You knew Rodriguez. Maybe you didn't participate directly, but you knew and you said nothing. That makes you complicit. Chief Hayes, I want every officer who ever partnered with Reeves interviewed by Internal Affairs. I want every case he touched reviewed, and I want a complete audit of your dashcam systems, because if Reeves could manipulate his recordings, others can too." Hayes looked like he wanted to argue, but Thompson's expression stopped him. "I'll have my people start immediately." "Not your people. I want an independent investigator. Someone from outside the department. Someone who reports directly to the mayor and the city council. I'll be making that recommendation to the mayor this evening." "Judge, with all due respect." Chief Hayes, with all due respect, your department just had an officer engage in years of illegal conduct without detection. Either your oversight systems are broken, or people in your department were deliberately looking the other way. Either way, you don't get to investigate yourselves on this one." Hayes's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Understood." Thompson watched as Reeves was loaded into a patrol car, the man who'd swaggered through courtrooms for 15 years, now slumped in the back seat like a deflated balloon. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory. Just a deep, bone-tired sadness at the waste of it all, the lives damaged, the trust broken, the years of injustice that could never be fully repaired. Rodriguez approached hesitantly. "Judge Thompson, I know I'm suspended, but I need to say something." "Go ahead." "Thank you for not letting him die. He didn't deserve your mercy, but you gave it anyway. I need to understand why." Thompson looked at the young officer. "Because mercy isn't about what people deserve, Rodriguez. It's about who we choose to be." James Reeves spent 15 years letting his worst instincts run wild because the system enabled him. "I refuse to become less than I am because he was less than he should have been." That's not mercy for him. That's integrity for me. He started walking back toward the courthouse, his legs suddenly feeling heavy. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a profound exhaustion. Behind him, he could hear Chief Hayes barking orders, officers securing the scene, the machinery of justice grinding into motion. When he reached the courthouse lobby, he found it packed with people who'd been evacuated from the courtroom. They broke into spontaneous applause when they saw him, and he wanted to tell them to stop, that he'd just done what needed to be done, nothing more. But he saw the faces in that crowd. Black, brown, white, all united in recognition that something important had happened here today. Not just the exposure of one corrupt officer, but the affirmation that the system, imperfect as it was, could still work when people had the courage to make it work. Marcus Riley pushed through the crowd, his mother right behind him. "Judge Thompson, I don't know what to say. You risked your life." "I risked nothing compared to what you've already survived, Mr. Riley. You were the brave one, fighting back against false charges when most people would have just taken a plea. You trusted the system when you had every reason not to. That's real courage." "What happens now?" Now we make sure this never happens to anyone else. We review every case Reeves touched. We change policies and procedures. We train officers better. We hold people accountable. It's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be fast, but it's going to happen." Martinez appeared at his elbow. "Judge, the mayor's on the phone. She wants to speak with you immediately. Also, CNN is here along with about 15 other news outlets. They want a statement." Thompson closed his eyes briefly. Of course they did. This was going to be national news by evening, international by tomorrow. A black judge confronting a racist cop, exposing systemic abuse, then talking him down from a potential massacre. It was every headline and think piece waiting to happen. "Tell the mayor I'll call her in an hour. Tell the press I'll make a statement at 5 p.m. And Catherine, thank you for everything you did today." "I didn't do anything except my job." "Exactly. You represented your client with integrity and courage. You forced the system to see what it didn't want to see. That's everything." Thompson made his way back to his chambers, closing the door behind him with relief. For a moment, he just stood there in the silence, letting the weight of the day settle over him. Through the window, he could see the city stretched out below the neighborhoods he'd grown up in, the streets where people were still trying to make honest livings, the communities that had been over-policed and underserved for generations. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife of 28 years, saw the news. "Are you okay?" He typed back. "I'm okay. Long day. Be home late." Her response came immediately. "I'm proud of you. So proud." Thompson set the phone down and sat at his desk, pulling out a legal pad. He began writing not a formal order, but notes to himself about everything that needed to happen next. The policy changes, the training reforms, the oversight mechanisms, the community meetings, the long grinding work of turning this moment into lasting change. There was a knock at the door. James entered quietly. "Judge, I know you need rest, but there's something you should see." He handed over a tablet showing a news feed. The story was already everywhere, but it was the comments that James was pointing to, hundreds of people sharing their own stories of encounters with Officer Reeves, other officers, other departments. The dam had broken. People who'd been silent were speaking up. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" James said. "Yes," Thompson agreed. "And it's going to be hard and messy and complicated, but it's necessary." The press conference at 5 p.m. was unlike anything Thompson had ever experienced. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters, cameras, microphones, creating a forest of technology pointed at the podium where he stood. Behind him, Mayor Patricia Richardson and Chief Hayes stood in solidarity, their presence a signal that this moment was bigger than one judge, one case, one officer. Thompson looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar from the local news, others belonging to national networks he'd only ever seen on television. Beyond the press, citizens lined the barriers, some holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus," and "End Police Brutality," others simply standing in silent witness. He saw Marcus Riley and his mother in the front row, Catherine Martinez beside them. He saw faces from his old neighborhood people who'd known him as Billy Thompson before he became Judge Thompson. "Good evening." He began, his voice steady. "Today this court heard evidence of serious misconduct by a sworn law enforcement officer. Officer James Reeves has been charged with assault under color of authority, civil rights violations, perjury, filing false reports, and evidence tampering. He is currently in custody and will face trial. These are not just charges against one man. They represent a failure of systems oversight and accountability that allowed misconduct to continue for years." He paused, letting that sink in. A reporter shouted a question, but Thompson raised his hand. "I'll take questions in a moment. First, I need to say something to Marcus Riley and to every person who has been victimized by police misconduct in this city." Thompson looked directly at Marcus. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we failed you. I'm sorry that the system meant to protect you became the source of your trauma. I'm sorry that you had to fight so hard just to prove your innocence when you should never have been charged in the first place. Your courage in standing up, in refusing to accept a plea deal for something you didn't do, in trusting that justice would eventually prevail, that courage saved not just yourself, but potentially dozens of others who would have been Officer Reeves's future victims." Marcus was crying again, but this time his mother's hand on his shoulder was one of pride, not just comfort. "To the broader community," Thompson continued, "I know that trust in law enforcement and in the justice system has been eroded by incidents like this. I know that many of you are angry, hurt, and wondering if anything will really change. I can't promise you perfection. What I can promise is accountability. Starting tomorrow morning, my office will coordinate with the district attorney, the police chief, and an independent oversight commission to review every case that Officer Reeves was involved in over the past 5 years. Every arrest, every testimony, every use of force report. Where we find evidence of wrongdoing, those cases will be reopened and adjudicated fairly." The crowd murmured with approval, but Thompson wasn't finished. "Additionally, I'm recommending to the mayor and city council that we implement immediate reforms. Mandatory body cameras that cannot be manually disabled during citizen encounters. Random audits of police footage by independent reviewers. A civilian review board with real power to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary action. Enhanced training on implicit bias, de-escalation, and community policing. And perhaps most importantly, a cultural shift within law enforcement, from viewing communities as threats to be controlled to viewing them as citizens to be served." A reporter shouted, "Judge Thompson, do you think Officer Reeves is a racist?" Thompson met the reporter's eyes. "I think Officer Reeves is a man who allowed his biases, conscious or unconscious, to dictate his actions in ways that caused real harm to real people. Whether he's a racist in his heart, I can't say. But I know his actions had racist outcomes. And in the end, the impact of our actions matters more than our intentions. A person doesn't have to burn crosses to perpetuate racial injustice. They just have to enforce the law unequally to see certain communities as inherently criminal, to let stereotypes override their duty to treat every citizen with dignity and respect." "What about the officers who worked with him?" another reporter called out. "Are they being investigated too?" "Yes. Officer Rodriguez has been suspended pending investigation into whether he knowingly covered up misconduct. Anyone who had knowledge of Officer Reeves's actions and failed to report them will face consequences. We cannot have a code of silence that protects bad cops at the expense of good policing." "Judge Thompson," a woman's voice cut through the others. "I'm Sarah Chen from the National Law Review. You put yourself in danger today when you went to confront Officer Reeves. Why would you risk your life for a man who clearly has no respect for people who look like you?" Thompson was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I didn't do it for him. I did it because a crowded parking garage full of innocent people didn't deserve to become a crime scene. I did it because Officer Rodriguez, despite his failings, didn't deserve to watch his partner die. I did it because even James Reeves deserved the chance to surrender rather than being killed. But most of all, I did it because I refused to let someone else's hatred make me into something I'm not. The moment I stopped believing in redemption, in due process, in the possibility that even broken people can face justice rather than just vengeance, that's the moment I stopped being worthy of wearing this robe. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Thompson answered what he could, deflected what he couldn't, and ended with a final statement that made its way into headlines around the world. Justice isn't about punishing the guilty. It's about creating systems where doing right becomes easier than doing wrong. Today was about one officer and one case. Tomorrow needs to be about building a justice system worthy of the trust we ask people to place in it. That work starts now, and it doesn't end until every person in this city, regardless of their race, their neighborhood, or their economic status, can look at a police officer or a judge and see protection rather than threat. That night, Thompson sat in his living room with his wife Diane, watching the news coverage replay his words over and over. She'd poured him a bourbon, his favorite after long days, and he held the glass without drinking, just feeling its weight. "You know this is going to follow you forever," Diane said softly. She'd been a social worker for 30 years, had seen her share of broken systems and people trying to fix them. "Every case you preside over from now on, people will be watching." "I know. And you know that some people are going to hate you for this, not just the bad cops, but the people who benefit from the system staying exactly as it is." "I know that too." She took his hand. "I'm terrified for you. But I'm also proud of the man you've always been. The boy from the projects who studied law by streetlight didn't do it so he could play it safe. He did it so he could make moments like today possible." Thompson finally took a sip of the bourbon, feeling it burn down his throat. "Did we really change anything, Di? Or did we just make ourselves feel better while the machine keeps grinding? You freed an innocent man. You exposed a corrupt officer. You set in motion reforms that will protect people. That's not nothing, William. That's everything." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Officer James Reeves was formally fired from the police department. His pension revoked, his charges upgraded as more evidence emerged. The files Linda Reeves had provided revealed a stunning pattern of misconduct, planted evidence in 12 cases, falsified reports in 37 others, excessive force in at least 23 arrests. The district attorney's office was overwhelmed with case reviews. Marcus Riley became something of a reluctant symbol, his face appearing on news programs and at rallies. Thompson watched from a distance as the young man grappled with sudden attention, eventually finding his voice as an advocate for criminal justice reform. In an interview 2 months after the trial, Marcus said something that stuck with Thompson. "I was one of the lucky ones. I had a good lawyer, a judge who cared about truth, and a mother who never stopped believing in me. But how many other people are sitting in jail right now because they weren't lucky? How many lives were destroyed because no one was watching?" The review of Reeves's cases bore out Marcus's concerns. 43 cases were reopened. 17 resulted in convictions being overturned. 8 people were released from prison after serving time for crimes they didn't commit, or for charges that should never have been filed. Each release was a vindication and a tragedy, years stolen lives, derailed families torn apart by injustice wearing a badge. Thompson presided over many of those cases, personally watching as men and women, mostly black and brown, mostly young, all carrying the weight of what had been done to them, walked free. Some were angry, demanding compensation and apologies. Others were just exhausted, wanting only to go home and try to rebuild. A few couldn't be reached at all, had died in prison, or disappeared into homelessness and addiction, their exoneration coming too late to matter. The city council, under pressure from community activists and facing potential federal oversight, passed a sweeping reform package. Body cameras became mandatory with severe penalties for tampering. A civilian review board was established with subpoena power and independent investigators. Officer training was completely overhauled, with emphasis on de-escalation and community relationships. It wasn't perfect. No policy ever is, but it was a start. Officer Rodriguez, after weeks of internal investigation, was given a choice: resign with a clean record or face termination and possible criminal charges for accessory after the fact. He chose to resign, and in a surprising turn became an advocate for police reform, speaking at training seminars about the dangers of the code of silence. "I knew what James was doing," Rodriguez said in one speech that Thompson watched online. "I knew it was wrong, but I told myself it wasn't my business, that speaking up would destroy my career, that maybe he was just having bad days. Every excuse I made allowed him to hurt more people. I have to live with that. And if my story can help one young officer find the courage to speak up when they see misconduct, then maybe I can start to make amends." Linda Reeves divorced her husband and moved across the country with her sons, trying to escape the media attention. But before she left, she met with Thompson in his chambers, her hands folded in her lap, her voice quiet but firm. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for not making me feel like a monster for staying silent as long as I did." "You're not a monster, Mrs. Reeves. You were in an impossible situation." "Maybe, but impossible situations are where we find out who we really are, aren't they? I found out I was someone who chose comfort and security over doing what was right. It took my husband threatening innocent people for me to finally act. That's not heroism. That's just finally doing the bare minimum of human decency." "You saved lives," Thompson said gently. "The people who would have been James's future victims, they're living their lives right now because you found the courage to speak up. Don't diminish that." She smiled sadly. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to teach my sons to be better than their father was. To see people as people, not as threats or stereotypes. That's the only redemption I can imagine." James Reeves himself pleaded guilty to a reduced set of charges after his attorney made it clear that going to trial would result in decades in prison. He was sentenced to 8 years with the possibility of parole after 5. At his sentencing hearing, Thompson wasn't the judge. He'd recused himself to avoid any appearance of bias, but he sat in the gallery wanting to see the end of the story he'd helped write. When given the opportunity to make a statement, Reeves stood slowly, his orange jumpsuit hanging loose on a frame that had lost 30 pounds. He looked at the packed courtroom, at the faces of some of his victims, sitting in the front rows at the television cameras recording every word. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, his voice hoarse. "I don't deserve it. For 15 years I wore a badge and told myself I was serving justice. But what I was really serving was my own ego, my own biases, my own need to feel powerful and in control. I saw young black men, and I didn't see citizens. I saw threats. I saw criminals. And I used my authority to punish people for the crime of not fitting into my narrow view of who deserved protection and who deserved suspicion." He looked directly at Marcus Riley, who sat stone-faced in the second row. "Marcus, I destroyed months of your life. I traumatized you, cost you opportunities, made you and your family live in fear. Nothing I say can undo that. I can only tell you that I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. And I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, inadequate but necessary. Marcus didn't respond, just stared back with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. As Reeves was led away, Thompson felt the weight of the moment. This was justice, but it was hollow justice. No sentence could restore the years stolen from Reeves's victims. No apology could undo the trauma. Justice in the aftermath of injustice was always incomplete, always a poor substitute for preventing the harm in the first place. But it was something. It was accountability. It was the system finally working the way it was supposed to, imperfectly, but sincerely. The months turned into a year. Thompson's life slowly returned to a kind of normalcy, though he was recognized now everywhere he went. People stopped him in grocery stores to thank him or to share their own stories of police misconduct. Students invited him to speak at law schools. Advocacy groups asked him to consult on reform efforts. He said yes to some no to others, always trying to balance his judicial responsibilities with his growing role as a voice for change. It was exhausting sometimes, overwhelming. But it was also energizing. He'd spent his entire career operating within the constraints of the system. Now the system was actually changing, and he was part of making it happen. Marcus Riley enrolled in law school. His application essay about his experience going viral and earning him scholarship offers from a dozen universities. He chose to stay local, attending the same school where Thompson had studied decades earlier. They met occasionally for coffee, the judge and the young man whose life he'd helped save, talking about cases and reforms and the long grinding work of bending the arc of justice. "Do you think things are really getting better?" Marcus asked. During one of their meetings, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee in the campus cafe where Thompson had once studied for the bar exam. "I think we're trying," Thompson said, "which is more than we were doing a year ago. But real change is slow, Marcus. It's not one big moment. It's 1,000 small moments, 1,000 daily decisions to choose fairness over expedience, to choose humanity over convenience. That's what I'm afraid of. That this moment will fade, that people will forget, that everything will go back to how it was." Thompson looked at the young man across from him, saw the idealism and the fear warring in his eyes, and recognized himself 30 years earlier. "Then we don't let them forget," Thompson said firmly. "We keep telling the story. We keep pushing for change. We keep holding the system accountable. That's what justice looks like in the real world, Marcus. Not a single climactic victory, but sustained effort over time. It's not as dramatic, but it's more powerful." 1 year to the day after the confrontation in the parking garage, Thompson stood on a stage at the National Criminal Justice Reform Conference in Washington, D.C. The invitation had come 6 months earlier, asking him to give the keynote address. He'd almost said no, uncomfortable with the attention. But Diane had convinced him that his voice mattered, that people needed to hear from someone who'd actually made change happen. The ballroom held over 2,000 people: judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, law enforcement officials, activists, formerly incarcerated people, academics, and advocates. Thompson looked out at that sea of faces and felt the weight of their expectations. They wanted answers, solutions, hope. They wanted him to tell them how to fix a system that had been broken for so long. He gripped the podium, took a breath, and began. "A year ago, I was a judge in Monroe County Superior Court hearing what should have been a routine case. A young man charged with assaulting an officer during a traffic stop. I'd heard 100 cases like it before. But this case was different, not because the facts were unique, but because we finally decided to look closely at the evidence instead of accepting the narrative we'd been given." He told the story, then not sparing the difficult parts, not making himself the hero. He talked about Catherine Martinez's courage in challenging the evidence, despite facing a system that discouraged such challenges. He talked about Dr. Kim's scientific testimony and Linda Reeves's devastating decision to turn against her husband. He talked about Rodriguez's complicity and the institutional failures that enabled Reeves for 15 years. "What happened in my courtroom wasn't exceptional," Thompson said. "Officer Reeves wasn't a uniquely bad actor. He was a product of a system that trained him to see certain communities as inherently criminal, that rewarded him for high arrest numbers without questioning the quality of those arrests, that protected him when complaints were filed, that looked the other way when patterns of misconduct emerged. He was able to do what he did because the system made it easy." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. "So here's what we learned. Justice isn't just about punishing individual bad actors. It's about creating systems where doing right becomes natural, where accountability is built in, where transparency is the default. Body cameras that can't be turned off during encounters. Independent review boards with real power. Training that emphasizes humanity over control. Data analysis that identifies problematic patterns before they become crises. Community oversight that gives citizens a voice in how they're policed." Thompson paused, looking around the room. "But even more than that, we learned that change requires courage. It requires people in positions of power to use that power, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's risky, even when their colleagues tell them to stay in their lane. Marcus Riley had the courage to reject a plea deal and demand his day in court. Catherine Martinez had the courage to challenge an officer with 15 years of supposed credibility. Linda Reeves had the courage to betray her husband to save future victims. And yes, I had to find the courage to confront a man with a gun when my judicial role gave me every excuse to stay safe in my chambers. He gripped the podium tighter. I'm not telling you this to pat myself on the back. I'm telling you because we all face moments where we can choose courage or convenience, where we can demand change or accept the status quo, where we can use whatever power we have, and we all have some to make things better or to keep things the same. The question isn't whether the system is broken. We know it is. The question is whether we have the courage to fix it. Thompson softened his tone. A year ago, 17 people were sitting in prison for crimes they didn't commit or for charges that should never have been filed. Today they're free. That's 17 lives reclaimed, 17 families reunited, 17 futures made possible. 128 cases have been reviewed and corrected. A police department has implemented reforms that are becoming a model for other cities. Community trust is slowly, painfully being rebuilt. He looked directly at the audience, now his voice carrying the full weight of his conviction. That's what justice looks like in the real world. Not perfect, not complete, not even close to enough, but real, tangible, worth fighting for. Each of those 17 people represents a victory for truth over power, for humanity over bureaucracy, for what should be over what has always been. Thompson's voice rose slightly. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you that everything is fixed, that one case changed everything, that we've solved racism in policing. But I am going to tell you that change is possible. That courage matters. That every person in this room has the power to make a difference in the sphere they occupy. Whether you're a judge, a prosecutor, a defense attorney, a police officer, an activist, or a citizen, you have power. The question is how you'll use it. He glanced down at his notes, then pushed them aside. I grew up 3 miles from the courthouse where I now serve. My mother cleaned houses. My father died when I was 12. I studied by streetlight because our electricity got cut off. I was stopped by police more times than I can count before I was 18, and every single time I was terrified. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd seen what could happen when an encounter with police went bad. The room was absolutely still. I became a judge because I still believe that the law can be a tool for justice if the people wielding it choose to make it one. Not automatically, not inevitably, but possibly. If we have the courage, if we have the persistence, if we refuse to accept that the way things are is the way things must always be. Thompson's voice grew stronger. Justice isn't just punishing wrong. It's creating systems where doing right becomes natural, where a police officer's first instinct is to de-escalate rather than dominate, where a prosecutor's priority is truth rather than conviction rates, where a judge sees every person who enters their courtroom as a human being deserving of dignity, not just a case number to be processed, where communities view law enforcement as partners rather than occupiers. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. That's the work, not dramatic, not flashy, just persistent, grinding daily effort to make the system a little bit better than it was yesterday. And when enough people do that work, when enough people make that choice, the system begins to change. Not quickly, not easily, but truly. Thompson smiled slightly. A year ago, Marcus Riley was facing years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Today he's in law school studying to become the kind of attorney who will defend the next Marcus Riley. That's not just his victory. That's our victory. That's proof that the system can work when we force it to. He looked around the ballroom one final time. So that's my challenge to everyone here. Go back to your courtrooms, your offices, your precincts, your communities. Find one thing you can change. One policy you can improve. One person you can mentor. One injustice you can address. And then do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Because justice isn't a destination. It's a direction. And as long as we keep moving in that direction, there's hope. The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Thompson stood at the podium, uncomfortable with the attention, but grateful for what it represented: not hero worship, but commitment to the work. After the speech, people lined up to talk with him, to share their stories, to ask for advice. He spent hours listening, connecting, encouraging. Among the crowd, he spotted a familiar face, Catherine Martinez, who'd flown in to hear him speak. "Not bad for a judge who claims he doesn't like public speaking," she said with a grin. "I hate every second of it," Thompson admitted. "But Diane says I owe it to people to use whatever platform I have." "She's right. You know Marcus is watching the live stream right now. He texted me. Said you made him cry." Thompson smiled. "How's he doing?" "Top of his class, clerking for a civil rights firm this summer. Already talking about running for office someday." Martinez's expression grew serious. "You changed his life, Judge. You changed a lot of lives." "We changed lives, Catherine. You were the one who fought for him when it would have been easier to just take the plea. And you were the one who made sure justice actually happened. Don't downplay that." As the crowd eventually thinned, Thompson found a quiet corner and checked his phone. Messages from colleagues, from former students, from people he'd never met thanking him for his words. But the one that mattered most was from Marcus. "Thank you for showing me what justice looks like when someone has the courage to make it real. I'm going to spend my career trying to do the same." Thompson typed back, "You already are. Keep going." He looked around the ballroom at the people still networking and planning and dreaming about a better system. This was the real work of justice, not one dramatic moment, but thousands of people making daily choices to be better, to demand better, to create better. As Thompson left the conference center and walked into the warm evening air, he thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the projects to law school to the prosecutor's office to the bench, from a system that saw him as a threat to becoming someone who could reshape that system. It had taken decades, and the work was far from over. But for the first time in his career, Thompson felt like the momentum was finally shifting. Not because of one case or one speech, but because people were waking up to what was possible. They were demanding accountability. They were refusing to accept that injustice was inevitable. His phone rang. It was Diane. "How'd it go?" "I think it went well. They actually listened." "Of course they listened. You gave them hope. That's what people need right now, proof that the system can change." Thompson hailed a cab, settling into the back seat as the city lights blurred past. "You know what's strange? A year ago, I was just trying to get through another day on the bench. I never intended to become some kind of symbol." "Maybe that's exactly why you are one. You didn't set out to be a hero. You just decided to do the right thing when it mattered most. That's more powerful than any grand gesture." As the cab drove through the city, Thompson watched people going about their lives, families eating dinner, couples walking hand in hand, teenagers laughing on street corners. This was what justice was really about. Not the courtroom drama or the headlines, but creating a society where all these people could live without fear, could trust that the system was there to protect them rather than threaten them. The cab pulled up to his hotel. Thompson paid the driver and stepped out onto the sidewalk, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere in this city and every city across the country, there were people like Marcus Riley trying to live honest lives. There were police officers trying to do their jobs with integrity. There were judges and lawyers and activists fighting for justice. And there were also people like James Reeves, trapped in their biases and prejudices, hurting people from positions of power. The difference, Thompson realized, wasn't that one side would win and the other would lose. The difference was that more people were choosing to fight for the former than to accept the latter. More people were willing to speak up, to demand change, to hold the system accountable. That was the real victory. Not that they'd fixed everything, but that they'd proven it was possible to fix anything. Thompson walked into the hotel lobby exhausted but not defeated. Tomorrow he'd fly home. Next week, he'd be back on the bench hearing cases, making decisions, doing the daily work of justice. But something fundamental had shifted. The work felt different now, not futile, but purposeful. Not overwhelming, but achievable. Because 1 year ago, in a crowded courtroom in Monroe County, they'd proven that truth could win. That courage mattered. That the system, for all its flaws, could still be a tool for justice, when the right people made the right choices at the right moments. And if it could happen once, it could happen again. And again. And again. That wasn't just hope. That was momentum. And momentum, once established, was hard to stop.